But so once you are assigned to the case, it's your case. I guess because obviously it depends on what the pleadings are. But what is the typical like length of a housing court case? What's typically happening? Like I guess how does it proceed? Like for example, like in criminal, it's arraignment. They have to give us discovery. Then there's hearings and there's trial. That's basically the gist of it.
Yeah.
What is like the how long does it usually take, and what's like the timeline for housing?
Housing court, summary proceedings, so it's the Wild West. There's cases that they push from first appearance to trial in a matter of less than 6 months. But on the other hand, I have a case from 2017 that's up to almost 60 appearances.
Okay.
So it really varies.
And what creates that distinction? Like what makes one last 60? I'm assuming it's what the case is about. Right? And what makes one, you're like, we're going to figure this out ASAP. Like, I guess, what kind of cases do they ASAP, and what kind of cases do they allow to just flow?
I feel like I want to just zoom out just for a second, because you mentioned summary proceeding, right? And we have to understand what a summary proceeding is to sort of get into that, right? You have plenary actions, which is your regular civil cases and your criminal cases where you have discovery and all these things. In summary proceedings, you don't have a right to discovery. Okay. So that's out of the picture. We're not going through any discovery time, which is probably one of the most lengthy parts of the process. So that's out of the picture, right? So there's the pretrial part, the resolution part, where the case begins. And the purpose is to sort of do pretrial motions to dismiss, negotiate potential settlements. You can be there for 6 months in that part, just litigating. You file a motion, with merit, of course, you have to set up a motion calendar, you have to brief it, you have to do oral arguments. That can take anywhere from 2 months to 6 months.
Okay.
And after you finish the resolution part, right, if you don't come to a settlement, the case doesn't get dismissed, it gets sent to part X or the trial part.
Okay, but so I want you to continue, but to get you even to that first part, it requires eviction notice?
Yes.
Right?
Well, we're talking before an eviction notice. So let's talk from the very first thing that a client would get would be, if it's a non-pay, they would get a 14-day notice that's called a rent demand, saying, hey, you owe this amount of money, and if you don't pay it to us, we'll take you to housing court.
Okay.
And if it's a holdover, they get a 90-day notice to terminate if they've been there for a long time. I think it's more than 2 years.
There's 30, 60, 90.
Yeah, based on the length of the
There's 10-day notices for licensees. There's a slew of different notices.
Okay.
There's notices to cure if there's some sort of condition in the apartment that the landlord is taking issue with, such as nuisance or somebody has an illegal partition, things like that.
Okay.
So this is even before anybody gets official eviction papers, before a case is commenced.
So all those things we were just talking about are called predicate notices.
Okay.
So you get the predicate notice, and then after the time in the predicate notice elapses, so like the 10 days, the 30 days, the 90 days, the 14 days, you get a notice of petition and petition. And that's the one that says you are being sued in housing court. And if you don't show up on this day, a default judgment will be entered against you. And so that's where you get your first day in housing court. And you go there, and that's where you have your talk with the person who works at HRA, who's in the housing court, courtroom. You do your intake, and if you qualify, you go over to a Universal Access to Justice Center. And that's where you might meet with a housing court attorney if you qualify, and you cross your fingers and hope you're being taken in for full representation instead of just advice. And then you'll also get your second court date, because the first court date is just about if you get a lawyer. Then that's your first date where you're represented by counsel, and the counsel, if there's a jurisdictional defense, like they didn't serve something properly, or I just had a case where the client has a Ring doorbell camera, and you can see the process server drive up, look at the apartment door, drive away. And I was like, oh, this is the best day ever. Yeah. But I have to write that motion to dismiss based on improper service by the first court date. And if it's not, we show up and we have a meeting with the landlord's attorney about possibly settling this case, or like what our plan is with the case. And from there, you could get sent to to a trial conference, like a pretrial conference from there, where the third court date would be pretrial conference, and then after that you go to trial.
Okay.
And at trial, if you lose, that's where they get a marshal's notice, or I'm sorry, a warrant of eviction, and then the person would get a notice of eviction, a marshal's notice posted on their door, and have 14 days, or the eviction would happen. And then it would be our role to get orders to show cause to delay that eviction date if there's
Good cause.
good cause. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
It's so
Can
complicated.
you get an eviction notice without under that first part? Because I feel like they give me an eviction notice after a couple months. I don't remember them telling
If you
me
don't
to go to
show
housing court.
if you don't show up to court, if you ignore the predicate notice and then your eviction notice,
Yeah.
then there's a default and
Happens all the
Yep,
time.
it does.
And just as he mentioned, the process server just drove up, looked, and just kept it pushing. And this is a chronic issue where a lot of papers are not being sufficiently served. And it happens all the time when we have to file order to show causes for people who never were served adequately. So they came to court after they saw a 14-day notice
Yes, exactly.
for eviction.
Yes, that's what I did. I mean, I knew I wasn't paying. I was like, when I saw that notice on my door, I was like,
Yeah.
But somewhere it was like, you can't go to housing court. I was like, let me do that.
Yeah. Well,
Also, like, I just want to go back to, you went to St. John's.
Yeah.
Why were you living in Manhattan?
You know what it was? I didn't have my priorities.
I lived in South Brooklyn too, so I wasn't doing so good
I was
either.
like, I was having a good time, man. And I was like, I don't know shit about Queens. I thought the universe put me, my office is in Queens.
yeah.
I think the universe was like, oh, you didn't want to go to Queens, motherfucker. I'll show you. But
They evicted you to Queens. Welcome to Queens, my brother.
Yeah. My agency is all 5 boroughs. I ranked what borough I wanted to go to. It was Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, Staten Island.
Yeah.
They put me in Queens, and I hit the head of the office like, yo, why Queens? She's like, well, you don't need to work here if you don't want to.
You want the job or not?
I want the job.
Yeah.
No, thank you. But